Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'm going to be covering the weather for April 29th of 2023. For today you can see that there is a slight risk for southern Georgia and much of Florida, uh, and a marginal risk towards near Miami, and extending over to the west coast, as well as a marginal threat for much of the deep south. Um, all this is being brought over from the front that was in Texas, continuing eastward, having time to strengthen from the intense heat over the Gulf of Mexico and large amounts of instability, and overall just get more powerful and refuel, and is now going uh, over the Florida Peninsula after refueling over the Gulf of Mexico, for the potential for hazards. There's the potential for embedded tornadoes and potentially water spouts that could develop off land and move on land as this storm continues inland, as well as the potential for some on land tornadoes to develop, as well as strong damaging winds associated with this storm, especially towards the northern portions of the system. And I'll show you that on the pivotal weather models, as well as the potential for large hail, especially along the eastern coast in southern southeastern coast of Georgia. If we look at the pivotal weather models, you can see that it was refueling over the Gulf of Mexico here and continuing eastward towards Florida, and as that continues, it makes its way inland. And you can see this how it's protruding a lot more outward than the rest of the system. That's where a lot of your damaging winds are going to be more powerful at as it continues eastward, as well as larger hail. And you can also see more intense reflectivity in the more northern portions of the storm, and that increases, especially along the coast of Florida, where you were seeing the stronger potential for large hail. If we look at it, it becomes even more apparent if we look at the composite reflectivity. It takes a second to load, but as that continues inland, you can see the protruding. Uh, you can see the protruding like segment here, and then it becomes more flat or, the further south it goes. But in this area again is likely to see more of a damaging wind threat and the stronger potential for hail. But then you can see it kind of like skips over a little bit of area here, along here, and then continues inland. Um, and then along the coast of Florida, large amounts of reflectivity and the potential for large hail as it continues, as well as the potential for hail as it around the further south you go. Still the potential for large hail. Not It doesn't necessarily increase the further south you go, but there is the potential for large hail. Um, it, the Along the storm boundary. But then you can see also this blob of storms here through the Mississippi Valley in the deep south, triggering that marginal threat that continues eastward. And I'll show you why there's not really much of a tornado threat for all this. But there's the potential for there is the potential for embedded tornadoes with this system, and even through the southern parts of Georgia as it continues. And if we look at the Cape, the instability in the atmosphere, um, you can see how there's very strong amounts of Cape along the frontal boundary, and the frontal boundary is very apparent on the Cape here, allowing you can see, especially over the Gulf of Mexico, large amounts of Cape and the potential for embedded water spouts along the western coast of Florida, and they could even potentially move inland. Uh, as the cape the strong cape blows inland. But then you can see um, the cape does significantly decrease inland here, uh, and that is to be expected. But you can still see how there is still instability in the atmosphere, and quite large amounts of it too, even if it is spotty, allowing for the potential for embedded tornadoes to develop. And then you can see still, even up here too, there's still large amounts of cape. Uh, but when I did check the lapse rates earlier, you can see that um, there isn't as I could have also been on another run of the models, but you can see that there's not really as strong and apparent lapse rates in that area, potentially decreasing the threat for tornadoes in that area there. But you can still see large amounts of lapse rates, especially on the western coast of Florida here, and that continues eastward. Uh, but you can see not really strong amounts of lapse rates in the blob that was over here. If we actually switch back over to the cape here, you can see that there is not there's still instability in the atmosphere for storm development, but there's not really large amounts of it. So that's really why there's not really going to be much of a tornado threat. But then I can further solidify that. If we look at the wind shear here, you can see that around the area there's a not very strong wind shear. There's a very weak wind shear there. Very weak wind shear in the low pressure system that you saw over there in that blob. But you can see large amounts of wind shear along the frontal boundary here, allowing for the development of embedded waterspouts. Then you can still see large amounts of wind shear along the frontal boundary as it continues inland along Florida or into Florida. Um, but you can also see still large amounts of wind shear in the large hail threat that you saw coming like in front of the storm, like around like slightly more ahead of the storm, allowing it looks like it could develop. Okay, let's go back to the composite reflectivity so I can put my words together better. You can see a little bit of more isolated development along the front in front of the front, and it kind of hops over, and you can see it's a little bit more isolated but still organized into one big line, and there's still the potential for uh, embedded tornadoes with that, but overall, large hail, especially through here, and damaging winds, especially in the development along the northern western coast of Florida and along the western coast of Florida, or eastern coast of Florida here, and the western coast of Florida as the front moves inland. Um, what else? Let's look at the dew point. I kind of forgot about that for a second. You can see large. You can see the dry line here, a very intense dry line between very humid air and very humid air, continuing eastward into Florida through the Gulf of Mexico. So humidity is not going to be a problem for storm development there, and you can still see large amounts of humidity in the more isolated threat for tornadoes along the Georgia coast, and just large amounts of humidity along the front, even when it continues over Florida. Yeah, you can still see the front here with the large amounts of humidity in front of it continuing eastward. So again, humidity is not going to be a problem, but then you can also see further up north um, large amounts of humidity in the low pressure system, and that continues eastward. there is there will be a trough that develops with that low pressure system. Uh, there will be a trough that develops with that low pressure system that will bring more severe weather to Florida. But I'll cover that tomorrow because that's when it's expected to hit Florida. But the weather for today, the severe weather for today, is expected to hit Florida later on today in, I think, maybe 1 or 2 hours as I'm recording this. Um, but again, the potential for embedded tornadoes and potentially waterspouts that could move inland from the western coast of Florida, uh, and the potential for embedded tornadoes as it continues over Florida, uh, even though the potential does decrease because the Cape and wind shear does decrease over Florida. Actually, no, I don't think wind shear decreases, but the Cape does. Um, so it does decrease the potential for embedded tornadoes as it's over Florida, but there's still the potential for tornadoes as there is strong amounts of Cape, and overall the strong potential for large hail and damaging winds, which will probably be more of a threat than embedded tornadoes as this system continues eastward. But now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out this social so Project Gladiator, and join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. I most likely won't go live with this system of storms, but I might go live later on uh, with the second front that hits Florida on Sunday. It really all depends. I could or couldn't. Um, I'll just have to wait and see, and I'll update you guys in the Discord and in tomorrow's forecast. And hopefully, I'll be back tomorrow with another forecast.